What is going on, YouTube? So coming back today with my next NFL mock draft. I believe this is 4.0, and I wanted to do one post pro day. This is going to be my last first round mock draft. I'm going to do one more before the NFL draft actually rolls around, and that will be like probably a 2 or 3 round mock draft to kind of give you guys like a full look into a preview for the 2016 NFL draft. But go ahead and do my 4.0, like I said, post pro day, really the last big set of events before the NFL draft, at least where players can work out besides individual workouts and interviews. And you really are starting to get an idea of who teams are looking at, who they like, who they don't. And with free agency also drawing to an end, gives you an idea of some of the new needs that opened up and some of the holes that were filled for some teams. So go ahead and start with my number 1 overall pick, and I believe it's been the same the entire way. And I have the Tennessee Titans selecting the offensive tackle out of Ole Miss, Laremy Tunsil. So Laremy Tunsil had a pretty phenomenal pro day. Apparently, I only saw a little bit of the highlights, including the bench press. I don't really watch pro day highlights, but I like to at least read up on what scouts are thinking, and then how players overall performed, at least the kind of the summary of it. And from what I saw, Laremy Tunsil was absolutely explosive on the bench press, looked incredibly athletic, was a lot more impressive in person for a lot of scouts for a lot of the workouts he was doing, and I think that kind of sealed his status as number 1 overall pick. I've mentioned this in almost every single video. I do think that Jalen Ramsey's been talked about as being the first overall pick, and I do think that wouldn't be terrible for the Titans, but when you're talking about building long term, you've already stated that your franchise quarterback is Marcus Mariota. And honestly, he was pretty good last year. Looks like he'll be able to develop into a decent quarterback. You need to protect him. Look at some of the teams that have built some good offensive lines. I mean, I like to use the Dallas Cowboys as an example if Tony Romo was able to stay healthy. And then also with DeMarco Murray in the backfield, that also adds an extra weapon for Marcus Mariota, and you need to be able to block for your new running back. So at number 2, I have the Cleveland Browns selecting the quarterback out of North Dakota State, Carson Wentz. So I don't have the pick changed. I don't think the Browns are confident enough in RG3 to be able to take that as a long-term solution. Now, I don't know. It is as stacked as I think a quarterback depth chart could be with the fresh start RG3, and then also probably, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the draft. It's a good match, but again, if there's any team that could screw up 2 quarterbacks that, RG3's kind of already screwed up, but even if he would have had a great chance, I guess, if there's any 2 teams that could screw up this type of selection or this type of quarterback depth, I guess it would be the Browns. So anyway, move on to my number 3 pick, and I have the San Diego Chargers selecting the cornerback out of Florida State, Jalen Ramsey. So I don't think there's any way Jalen Ramsey makes it out of the top 3. Again, I've mentioned this before. I kind of like some of the pieces that the Chargers have in place on defense. They need to start replacing that secondary. They lost Eric Weddle, and honestly, I don't know. They don't have much outside of that. They need something to build around back there, and Jalen Ramsey would be a really, really good fit, really, on any team. And you're talking about a division that is a little bit weak right now at quarterback. Alex Smith and Derek Carr are the far and away 2 best quarterbacks in my mind. Well, obviously outside of Phillip Rivers. I guess it just got a little bit weaker because of the Denver Broncos. But you're talking about a division that I think you need solid defensive play to win just to compete with developing teams. Like I said, like the Raiders, they might have one of the best defensive players in football, and now Khalil Mack. Obviously, the Broncos have a phenomenal defense, and the Chiefs do as well. So I think the Chargers have to start developing to get to that level and be able to support Phillip Rivers on the defensive side of the ball. So at number 4, I got the Dallas Cowboys selecting the defensive end out of Ohio State, Joey Bosa. So I think there's a chance that the Cowboys decide to trade up for Jalen Ramsey, and I think that there's also a chance they decide to take Myles Jack. But I think the best option for them is still Joey Bosa. I think they need help on the defensive line, and he's still the best defensive end available at this point. There's been, I think there's been a little bit of, I wouldn't say bashing of Joey Bosa, but I think if anything, his draft stock has dropped a little bit since the end of the college football season and since all the pro days, Senior Bowl, Combine went past. But still, he's still probably the most talented defensive end in the draft and is deserving of being the first defensive end taken off the board. So at number 5, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting the linebacker out of UCLA, Myles Jack. So I love what the Jaguars have been able to do so far in free agency. They filled a lot of holes. You're talking about a team that is still a little bit thin at cornerback, but you're also talking about a team that plugged almost every hole offensively. And like I said, while they do still need help at cornerback, I think it's a little bit too early to take Vernon Hargreaves when you have a guy like Myles Jack, who's shown that he's recovering pretty well from that leg injury, and then, or was it ACL, MCL? I can't really remember which one it was that ended his season, but he's just too athletic. He can play really any position on the defensive side of the ball, maybe outside of D tackle and cornerback, but he's so versatile. Again, another good guy to build around on that defense, and you add in a guy like Myles Jack that puts, I'd say, 2 good. Now with Malik Jackson on the defensive line, that puts a good pass rush along with, especially with Dante Fowler coming back, with a good start to the linebacking core. So at number 6, I have the Baltimore Ravens taking the defensive end out of Oregon, DeForest Buckner. So DeForest Buckner's seen a rise in his draft stock a little bit. There's kind of been a meshing of the top 6 prospects in the class now, and the top 6 are the top 6 that I have right now in the draft. The Baltimore Ravens, they do need a little bit of help all across the defense. I do still think that they need a little bit of help at corner, but defensive line is another pressing need. And you got a guy like DeForest Buckner, who's just an absolute athletic freak. He's got, I think he's 6'7", 6'8", with a massive wingspan. He's got good speed. He's able to get off the line pretty well. There's been talk of him being a big bust risk, but I guess you could say that with any defensive player. I think there's bigger risks, definitely a lot more red flags in some players that have first round potential more than DeForest Buckner. So at number 7, I have the San Francisco 49ers taking the quarterback out of California, Jared Goff. So as far as I can remember, I've had Jared Goff in the same place. I don't think that they're going to go with Colin Kaepernick. Blaine Gabbert would be the next best option, and it's new regime in San Francisco, which probably means new quarterback. And I've said this every single time. The 49ers and Jared Goff just seems to me like a very good match. You've got guys in San Francisco that I think will be able to help Jared Goff mature. If they do decide to bring back Anquan Bolden, I'm not sure if they're going to, but I think that could help them pretty well. And I like the idea of a backfield with Carlos Hyde if he's able to stay consistent, healthy, and Jared Goff. I think those are some good building blocks heading into the future. So at number 8, I have the Philadelphia Eagles selecting the quarterback out of Memphis, Paxton Lynch. So the Eagles have shown interest in Paxton Lynch. I think it's another good match. They did re-sign Sam Bradford, but I think it'd be good for the Eagles to have a talented option if and when Sam Bradford goes down again. I wouldn't say if, I'd definitely say when, just because it seems like every single year he goes down with injury, including this past year. Now, again, I'm not doubting Bradford's talent. When he is healthy, he's a pretty good quarterback, but again, there needs to be another option for the Eagles heading into the future after Chip Kelly left. And Paxton Lynch, I think, is a good fit. The one problem to me with this pick is, and I'm assuming a lot of you guys would agree with this, is the fact that the Eagles did trade up. Now, I don't know if most teams feel like Paxton Lynch would be available still at 13. I don't know if he will. There's a lot of teams, obviously, in the top 15 that could use a quarterback like him. It's been an up and down draft stock for Paxton Lynch. I've seen him go as early as 6 or 7, as late as 28, 29. I think that, like I said, Paxton Lynch is a great option still. He's got a high ceiling. He's got good size. Obviously, at 6'7", probably one of the tallest quarterbacks in the league. And, again, I like the fit with the Eagles. So, at number 9, I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selecting the defensive end out of Clemson, Shaq Lawson. So, I think it's pretty much a done deal at this point that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be taking a defensive end or outside linebacker. I think it just matters who. Noah Spence seemed to be the lock for a little while, but I think his draft stock's kind of cooled off a little bit. He probably will drop down lower first, maybe early second. And again, Shaq Lawson, I don't think he's ever dropped out of being maybe a top 20 pick at the absolute lowest. And right now, I think he will end up falling off in the top 10. And again, it's a good fit. I think the Buccaneers do need a guy like Shaq Lawson, help with that defense. And again, I like what the Buccaneers have built now, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They got some good building blocks, and if they keep building the way that they have, I think this could be a very successful, maybe a playoff contender in a few years. So in number 10, I got probably the biggest reach so far, and that's the New York Giants selecting the linebacker out of Alabama, Reggie Ragland. So the Giants have signed quite a few players to help out on the defensive side of the ball. They do still probably need a third corner, but I don't think that they're going to I don't think that they're going to take a guy like Vernon Hargreaves to be a third cornerback on that defense right now, when there's, I think, more pressing needs. And linebacker, I think, is one of the biggest ones. If Myles Jack is still available at 10, I don't think there's a chance that he gets past the Giants. The problem is I don't know if he gets past, I don't think he gets out of the top 7. And really the next best option at inside linebacker to me is Reggie Ragland. I know that he might not have as much talent, athleticism as some of the guys around here, but I think he's one of the safest picks. I think he's got a nose for the football, unlike any other linebacker in this draft. And I think whatever team takes him will have a solid leader and a good corner linebacker for probably 10 or 12 years. So at number 11, I have the Chicago Bears taking the cornerback out of Florida, Vernon Hargreaves. So I love what the Bears did in free agency, being able to go out and get Jarrell Freeman, even though I was hoping he would stay with the Colts. And then also Danny Trevathan. I think those were two. I don't think that Trevathan was a steal by any means. 4 years, $28 million. I think it was a great signing. I think it was a good value pick, but I do think Jarrell Freeman was a steal. They got him for, I think, like $4 million a year, and he's one of the better inside linebackers in football. And that was one of the bigger needs for the Bears, and they filled it. And now I think the most pressing need is cornerback, and if Hargreaves is there, then I think they'll scoop him up in a heartbeat. All right, so at number 12, I've got the New Orleans Saints taking the defensive tackle out of Louisville, Sheldon Rankins. So the Saints need a lot of help on the defensive line. They do need a lot of help in the secondary, and I think they will take Vernon Hargreaves if he's available. But probably with him gone, I think they end up taking a defensive lineman. That's probably the second most pressing need, especially at this point in the draft. And I think Sheldon Rankins is probably the best defensive tackle available in the draft. Obviously, it's an open-ended opinion, but I like the idea of Sheldon Rankins going to the Saints. I think that he'd be the best defensive tackle on the roster. They've got Kevin Williams. He's really, really old. And then they also signed Nick Fairley to a 1-year deal, but they need a long-term option to be able to build around on that defense. I mentioned before I like what they got in place with Cam Jordan, and then also Kenny Vaccaro in the secondary is a very good piece as well, one of the better safeties in the NFL. And I think if they could slowly start piecing together that defense and, maybe be able to pick up another good defensive piece in the second, third round and maybe do a little bit of cleanup work at the end of free agency, they could maybe get to being a mediocre defense this year, middle of the pack, and start working on from there. But anyway, move on to the number 13 pick, and I got the Miami Dolphins taking the offensive tackle out of Notre Dame, Ronnie Stanley. So Stanley had a pretty poor pro day. I don't know if there's any offensive tackle that's seen his draft stock fall more over the last maybe 3 weeks than Stanley, but I still think he's got too much talent to make it out of the top 15. The Dolphins do need a little bit of help on the offensive line. They do have a need that kind of opened up at defensive end after losing Olivier Vernon, but I like this pick. I think that this is more of a best player on the board deal than anything. And he, like I said, he's still extremely talented. At one point, I believe he was like the number 3 or number 4 player on my NFL draft big board. And I think the talent's still there. It's just got to have a pretty good summer. And then when you start moving into OTAs and I guess rookie minicamp, then he's going to have to start pushing forward. So at number 14, I got the Oakland Raiders selecting the outside linebacker out of Georgia, Leonard Floyd. So I think the Raiders just need help along the defensive line. Cornerback is another probably pressing need, but they filled a lot of holes through free agency. They've done a really good job. But I do still think they need someone opposite Khalil Mack, and Leonard Floyd is a good match there. I like what Leonard Floyd brings to the table. He's very quick off the edge, got good snap in the hips, and I think a combination of him and Khalil Mack could probably form maybe the most deadly duo in the AFC West, which says a lot because you're talking about a division with Von Miller, Justin Houston, Tamba Ali, and yeah, I like what the Raiders have in place. A top 15 pick can help them out dramatically, and with the guys talented as Leonard Floyd still on the board, I think taking one of the best players available is a good move as well. So at number 15, I got the LA Rams taking the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, Laquan Treadwell. So Laquan Treadwell ran a pretty slow 40, I believe around 4.5, 4.6. It was closer to 4.6. And I just don't think that his draft stock really gets hurt that much. I don't think his value comes from his speed. I think it comes from his overall athleticism, his length, his ball skills, and just the fact that he was an absolute stud whenever he was healthy at Ole Miss. And I think that will translate extremely well to the NFL. Now, the Rams do need a quarterback very badly, but if Lynch, Goff, and Wentz are off the board, then I think they're going to wait until the second round, maybe fill in free agency. There's not a whole lot left in free agency. Fitzpatrick's probably the best thing left, but I think that whatever they have at quarterback needs to have a little bit of help at wide receiver. They need a primary wide receiver, and Laquan Treadwell is definitely the best one available in my mind. So at number 16, I got the Detroit Lions taking the defensive lineman, can play DT or D end, out of Alabama, Jarran Reed. So they've shown a pretty high amount of interest in Jarran Reed. I think they do have a good foundation in place with Ziggy Ansah, but they do lose Nick Fairley, so that creates a hole to fill. And like I said, they've shown a lot of interest in him, and I think it's a good match. They do still need a little bit of help at wide receiver with Megatron gone, but they do have a few other wide receivers in place, and they did sign Marvin Jones, so I think that plugs the need for now. So at number 17, I have the Atlanta Falcons taking the defensive end out of Clemson, Kevin Dodd. So this would add another Clemson kid, I guess on the opposite side of Vic Beasley. Mentioned this before. I think Vic Beasley will be a stud in the NFL in the coming years. Kevin Dodd, a guy that is maybe not the fastest defensive end, but has one of the better noses for a quarterback, and also I think he's pretty good at stopping the run. I think he's NFL ready. I think that's one of his more underrated qualities, and the Falcons do need a little bit more help along the defensive line, maybe with a pass rush. So at number 18, I got the Indianapolis Colts, like the offensive tackle out of Michigan State, Jack Conklin. So the Colts need help along the offensive line. There's no doubt about that. And Jack Conklin's still there. I think they pretty much have to take him. To me, clear third best offensive tackle in the draft. There's a little bit of discrepancy after him. I guess maybe Jason Spriggs is the next best option off along the offensive line after that, or at offensive tackle. And yeah, they need to start protecting Andrew Luck. Can't let him get banged up long term. He's a franchise quarterback. And just as a Colts fan myself, I really hope that they do take an offensive lineman. So at number 19, I have the Buffalo Bills selecting the defensive end out of Oklahoma State, and that is Emmanuel Ogbah. So the Bills don't have a bad defensive line, but I think they need a little bit of help around the outside linebacker defensive end spot, and Ogbah can really play either of the two. He played a little bit of both while he was at OSU, and I think that he'd be a little bit better option than Jarius Wynn. So at number 20, I have the New York Jets selecting the defensive tackle out of Alabama, A'Shawn Robinson. So I'm not sure if Muhammad Wilkerson's going to be on the Jets roster next year. They do have a pretty good defensive line right now, but I think, especially if you don't want to sign him to a mega deal, which he's going to get next year if he decides to stay. I believe he got slapped with the franchise tag this year. And even if A'Shawn Robinson doesn't play right away, I think he fits in well as a New York Jet. I think the Jets could look a couple ways here. I guess safety being one of them. I think the Jets to me are the biggest mystery of a pick, and I've seen quite a few mock drafts having them take anywhere from a wide receiver to a running back. Well, not really a running back anymore. I think linebacker is a big need as well, but there's not a whole lot available at inside linebacker at this point in the draft. So like I said, I like the fit of A'Shawn Robinson. I think he's the second best defensive tackle available at this point. I think it's close between him and Chris Jones, but I think he's got a little bit of an edge on him, and he was just an absolute animal on the defensive line at Alabama. So at number 21, I got the Washington Redskins selecting the running back out of Ohio State, Ezekiel Elliott. So I don't know if Zeke's going to fall this far, but if he does, I don't know if there's a team in the league right now that needs more help at running back than the Redskins. And I think that's their clear biggest need right now. They do need a defensive tackle. I've heard them maybe signing Terrence Knighton, re-signing, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Right now, their starting running back is Matt Jones, and I believe their backup is Silas Redd. So they let Alfred Morris go. Matt Jones is okay. I think he serves well as maybe a third down back. He's an okay short yardage back. He played okay last year, but God, if you want Kirk Cousins to be successful long term, you're gonna have to get him some help. And Ezekiel Elliott, clear cut best running back in the draft. Like I said, I don't know if he falls this far, but if he does, the Redskins should scoop him up. So at number 22, I got the Houston Texans selecting the wide receiver out of Baylor, Corey Coleman. So Coleman, even though for me in this mock draft he is falling off the board as the second wide receiver, maybe not the second most talented, but I think this just fits in well. Can stay in Texas. The Texans will need a little bit of help at wide receiver. Obviously, they have DeAndre Hopkins in place as a clear number one, but I think they need a number two. And Corey Coleman brings a little bit of variance to the wide receiver spot, a guy that's got quite a bit of speed, great hands, can run a multitude of routes, one of the better route runners that Baylor had, and obviously has seen a lot of exposure in air raid offense. Obviously, the Texans don't run that, but I think they need to add a little bit of talent to help out Brock Osweiler coming in. So at number 23, I got the Minnesota Vikings selecting the wide receiver out of Ohio State, Michael Thomas. So I think Michael Thomas is honestly the second best receiver in this draft. I think that possession wide receivers are extremely underutilized now, and their importance is a little bit underrated just right now in the NFL. And Michael Thomas, I think, could have benefited from having maybe a more consistent option at quarterback last year instead of splitting time between Cardale and JT Barrett. Ohio State had an incredibly, for being 12-1, it was a very much up and down season, and I think the wide receivers got hurt a little bit through that. Obviously, he wasn't the number one option either between Nick Vannett. Well, he was the number one option, but he had a lot of other weapons in that offense. You're talking about an offense with Ezekiel Elliott, like I said, Nick Vannett at tight end, and then also Jalen Marshall, another wide receiver. So I like the fit. I think the Vikings could definitely use a possession wide receiver. I don't really think they have one right now. I like Cordarrelle Patterson. I like Stephon Diggs, but both of them are a little bit more shifty guys. They're not possession wide receivers. And I think Teddy Bridgewater needs that guy that he can look to as a primary route, maybe 10, 15-yard curls, outside receiver. And I like Teddy Bridgewater. A lot of people, pretty much everyone has a different opinion on him, but I think that he's a good franchise quarterback, and you need to help him out. So at number 24, I got the Cincinnati Bengals selecting the wide receiver out of Notre Dame, Will Fuller. So the Bengals are still thin at wide receiver. Obviously, they still have one of the best in the game with A.J. Green, but you lose Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu. They're number 2 and number 3 wide receivers who were both big for them last year, and you need to fill those spots. So they were talking about Braxton Miller for a little bit. Will Fuller, similar receiver, a little bit smaller, faster. I think a little bit faster than Braxton Miller when you're talking about just straight go routes. But I think he is also the third most talented wide receiver in this draft, behind Michael Thomas and Laquan Treadwell. And I think the Bengals do need a little bit more of a stretch the field type player, that long field wide receiver threat. A.J. Green's not really that type. Again, more of a possession athletic wide receiver. But I think it would add a great option opposite A.J. Green. So at number 25, I got the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting the cornerback out of Houston, William Jackson. So I think the Steelers could go one of 3 ways here: Mackenzie Alexander, Eli Apple, or William Jackson. I just don't know if there's a single, if there's a single cornerback that's seen their stock rise more than William Jackson. He's got great size and played extremely well at Houston. Good athleticism, can hang with, I think he can hang with guys like Treadwell's, and then when we move into the NFL, like AJ Green's, like Des Bryant's. I don't know if Antonio Brown's really his style, but some of those bigger possession receivers on the outside, I think he can definitely handle, and the Steelers do need a corner this year in the first round. So number 26, I got the Seattle Seahawks selecting defensive end. All right, sorry guys, kind of got cut off there in the middle, but coming back, like I said, at pick number 26 with the Seattle Seahawks taking Robert Nkemdiche, and I like what Nkemdiche has just tools-wise. As you're talking about just pure talent, obviously when you're going off pure talent, might actually be the best player in this draft. Definitely a top 5 talent, but the red flags are pretty high. You go back to last season before the Sugar Bowl, falling out of, what was it, like 2 to 4 story window when he was blazed out of his mind and then had to go to a hospital, recovered, but was suspended for the game anyway. And really, statistically, wasn't a great year. He didn't have a great year at Ole Miss to begin with. Like I said, the talent's been there. He's definitely shown more than flashes. He was productive at Ole Miss, but again, it's just a matter of being able to mature to the next level and be able to make the jump that some guys like Randy Gregory, Johnny Manziel weren't able to make in recent years. Even though he does have the talent, it's definitely there. So at number 27, got the Green Bay Packers taking the tight end out of Arkansas, and that's Hunter Henry. So Hunter Henry, I've had this pick before. I like this pick. There are a little bit of needs along the defensive line for the Green Bay Packers. It's not dire needs, but it is something they probably should fill in free agency or with this pick. But I think the tight end position is something that really needs to be filled. And I think Hunter Henry is honestly extremely underrated in this draft. I like what Hunter Henry brings to the table with his just overall size, athleticism, his catching ability. He even he's a pretty good run blocker, at least from watching him in college. I don't know if that's just from the fact of how good the rest of the Arkansas offensive line was, just maybe it was so good that it made him look good also, but it looks like he fits the part. And I think with adding a good tight end, that would really complete the Packers offense if Eddie Lacy is able to lose some weight and actually be productive next year. So number 28, I got the Kansas City Chiefs taking the defensive tackle out of Mississippi State, Chris Jones. So Chris Jones' stock has risen pretty dramatically, I'd say, in the last few weeks. After the end of the season, people started noticing that, this kid's got some talent. To me, I actually see him as being the second best defensive tackle in this class. But again, one of the lesser known names that I have going in this first round. He wasn't a huge name while he was at Mississippi State. Was expected to be probably a 3rd or 4th round pick, maybe as high as a 2nd while he was still in college during the 2015 season. But he's good off the line. He's a good anchor in the middle, and he's actually got a pass rushing ability. He's got a high upside also. And the Chiefs need help, I'd say, more on the defensive line than really any other position on defense. I'd say safety is something that might be a pressing need, but they got I believe they locked up Eric Berry for a couple years. They might have franchise tagged him. And then Hussein Abdullah, not 100% sure on his situation. I don't know if he's a free agent this year or next, but if he is kept for another year or multiple years, that's another, I'd say, top 10 safety that they've got locked up for a little while. So at number 29, I've got the Arizona Cardinals selecting the safety out of USC, Sua Cravens. So this is the first mock draft where I've had Sua Cravens going in the first round. He's extremely talented. I love what he did at USC, and I think his skill set translates very well to the NFL. He's got a high level of athleticism, high level of upside, a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and really was the heart and soul of the USC defense last year. Great nose for the ball, can play the linebacker position. I don't think he's fast enough to play at the corner position, definitely not, but I'd say be able to cover some tight ends in the NFL. And the Cardinals, I'd say, are a little bit thin at safety alongside Tyrann Mathieu. They had a little bit of help last year. I think Rashad Johnson played pretty solid, but I think that they need another option long term. And Sua Cravens, I think there's a couple of safeties that are worthy of this spot. Actually, it's pretty much a log jam at the top. I've had safeties at the top, ranging from Jeremy Cash to Von Bell to Darian Thompson to Myles Killebrew, Von Bell. I think I already mentioned Von Bell. Keanu Neal, might have mentioned him also. I don't know. There's 6 or 7. And Stuart Cravens is one of them. I think it's more a mix of who goes to that team. I think they've been talking to Keanu Neal a little bit, but I like what Stuart Cravens would be able to bring to the Cardinals. I think it's a good fit alongside Tyrann Mathieu. There'd be 2 very, very athletic safeties that both have a great nose for the ball and are good tacklers. So at number 30, I got the Carolina Panthers selecting the cornerback out of Ohio State, Eli Apple. So Josh Norman's obviously their number 1 option, will probably be for a while, but he's also going to be expensive. And I think you're going to need someone alongside him that's maybe not a top-tier name coming out of free agency. And I think the next best corner available on the board is Eli Apple. William Jackson saw a big rise in his draft stock. Again, there's a couple corners that I think would be worthy of a first-round pick. I just think that Mackenzie Alexander's fallen too far. Teams don't really consider him. At one point, he was pretty much a perennial top 10 pick, and now he's slid maybe out of the first round. But I think he could end up going here. I think Eli Apple has a great chance. I think Kendall Fuller could. And I'm trying to think even further down the list. That's all I can think of right now. But like I said, there's a couple guys in the running for that. I think it's a good fit with the Panthers. Like I said, he'd be a good corner alongside Josh Norman in a defense that's obviously very good. I've mentioned multiple videos. I like what the Panthers have put together at every single level, stretching from Quan Short to Coney Ealy. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. To Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis, one of the best linebacking duos in college football in the NFL, and then obviously Josh Norman, one of the best cornerbacks. So at number 31 in the last pick in the first round, I have the Denver Broncos selecting the outside linebacker out of Ohio State, Darren Lee. So obviously, the Broncos might have the best outside linebacker in college football right now. Or I don't know why I keep saying college football. In the NFL with Von Miller, obviously, was maybe the biggest reason why they won the Super Bowl. He was the Super Bowl MVP. And I think they could use some help alongside him. They lost a lot of their pass rush to free agency and a lot of their speed at linebacker. They lost Danny Trevathan, which I think is an underrated loss because he was, in my opinion, one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and he was a big and very underrated part of that Broncos defense. Obviously, they lose Malik Jackson. Very valuable defensive lineman. Derek Wolfe is good. I think that they could use someone better. And just depth along that linebacking core, like I said, where they lost a lot this offseason, is going to help dramatically for the Broncos. Now, they could look running back. I don't think Derrick Henry's going to fly off the board that early. They could look quarterback if they're really wanting to reach for maybe a Christian Hackenberg or a Connor Cook if they want to take them that early. But like I said, I think an outside linebacker fits well here. I think Darren Lee's definitely worth the first-round pick. Great pass rusher, has been working out great from what I've heard so far. He's already worked out for the Broncos, and decent combine, very quick, had a very good pro day as well. So that concludes my NFL Mock Draft 4.0. If you have not seen my previous mock drafts, or if you are also an NBA fan, I've been doing quite a few mock drafts in that also. If you want to see the change up of the picks, I have the results. I believe in my previous 2 mock drafts, I put the results in the description, so you can just go over and look at those if you don't want to go through the entire 40-minute talking head video, which I could completely understand. The results of this entire mock draft will definitely be in the description below. Again, if you just want to look through that. I do like to do my explanations just because I don't want to be just a talking head just reading off a piece of paper. I mean, obviously, I do have my notes here on a piece of paper, but that's, if you guys ever see me looking down, actually, I want to show that right now. It's just the, it's not really like the stats or anything. It's just like the team, the order, player, and then the college position, all that stuff, basic information. And then I like to do my own descriptions because I say college football is maybe the sport that I follow the closest, especially the ones when I do analysis on YouTube, and then also follow the NFL extremely closely as well. So yeah, like I said, I'm probably going to put my last mock draft in the outro, and then either my draft big board rankings, they might be a little bit outdated at this point, honestly, but still relatively good, and then it would give you an idea of the names and where they're ranked. And it gives you quite an in-depth look at most of the names at literally every single position besides special teams. So like I said, that pretty much does it. yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah.
If you haven't gone and checked that out yet and you still want to check it out, I'm going to put the link in the description below as well as in the outro. So today I wanted to do, like I said, 2.0, kind of my post-Super Bowl mock draft, and it obviously did change up a little bit. We've had the Senior Bowl since then. Obviously, a couple things have changed with